Welcome to Empower Connect, the podcast where we explore the transformative journey of forgiveness, personal growth, and connecting to God, self, and others. I'm your host, Carolyn McLean, and I'm delighted to welcome a very special guest with us today as we explore the theme of developing your crown, growth, and intentionality. Together, we will uncover strategies, insights, and stories to help you cultivate a life of purpose, meaning, and fulfillment. So get ready to embark on a journey of self-discovery and transformation. So I would like to introduce our guest. I have known her for a long time. She's very special to my heart. She's my mentor. She's been my supervisor. She's been my coach. You name it. Her name is Geneane White, and she is a certified John Maxwell personal growth and lifestyle coach. She's a certified MLCT Maxwell leadership coach and trainer, youth speaker and coach. She's also a DIS consultant and motivational speaker. She's also an author of short stories laced with motivation and inspirational messages. Y'all should check her out, y'all. Geneane is a registered health administrator who has been teaching medical information management classes, specializing in medical coding for over 38 years. She is also a member of the Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Inc. sorority. She's an e-speaker, the Successful Women Academy. She's part of Toastmaster and the John Maxwell leadership team. She is also the owner of Compassion at the Well. And if you would like to follow Geneane, you can follow her at Compassion at the Well on Instagram. And today she will be talking about developing your crown and growth, developing your crown, growth and intentionality. So let's welcome Geneane. Welcome, Geneane.
Well, thank you, Coach Carolyn. I am just delighted to be here. It's really pleases me to be able to share some good information. And like you said, we've known each other for a long time. So I just really feel comfortable with this. And I know that we're going to make a difference in someone's life. So
Yes.
I'm ready for you.
All right. So we're ready.
All right.
Would you like
I,
to
I,
tell anyone else about anything, before we get started?
well, I want to start out with a quote.
Okay.
And it says, this quote is an anonymous quote that says, people judge you by your actions, not your intentions. You may have a heart of gold, but so does a hard boiled egg. And I
Uh-oh.
think this is what this is saying. I'm not saying that about talking about being judged, but this is saying, in other words, you have to have action with what it is you're doing to make a difference. And so this quote leaves me with the whole thing of strengthening your crown and growing into intentionality and knowing what intentionality is.
All right. Thank you. I'm sure we're going to hear more about that later on. But before we get into intentionality, and yes, I'm a little country, sorry, intentionality, um, could you kind of tell us what is developing your crown? What does that mean?
Well, I'll start out with telling you how I came about with that, and it is
Okay.
really kind of an interesting story. At least I think it is. And as you mentioned, I like to write short stories. But during Black History Month, I noticed a post on social media of Ruby Bridges as a young girl in the classroom. And you may have noticed this too or seen this on Instagram. Ruby was holding tightly onto her book bag, um, with such a frightened look on her face.
Yes.
She had all the outward physical features showing that she was a frightened little girl. And I mean, I was just really mesmerized by that. And I kept looking just to kind of get a feeling for what she was thinking about as she was holding onto that bag surrounded by all these people. Some were there to aid her, and some were there to bark against her. Some were there because they
Right.
did not want her to be there. And we all know this. I was so taken back by this picture because it took me back. It just took me back to my childhood during a time when I was on vacation with my grandmother and my cousins. So bear with me. I'm going to go over this little story with you.
Okay.
We had traveled to visit my great aunt, and as we got closer to our destination, which was my great aunt's house, I noticed a sign on the local drugstore displaying a juicy hamburger. Yeah, hamburger. And the signs back then had vibrant colors and were usually stamped on a tin plate. So this hamburger was like reaching out to me. And
Yeah.
as a little girl, I kept that back in my memory banks. And so later that week, my friends and I decided to take a walk, and that walk took me back right across from that drugstore with that hamburger sign. Now, with all that home cooked food, I still wanted a hamburger. Can you imagine that? I can't imagine that now as an adult, but
Yeah.
that's the child for you. And at that time, my friends informed me that the owner of the store was not going to let me eat in the store. So they decided they were going to wait outside. They were used to it. They were from that small town, and so they understood what was
Mhm.
going on. And I can remember vividly slowly walking up those rickety wooden steps, just like it was yesterday. And as I opened that squeaky door, that wooden screen door that looked like it had a lot of slamming, it had been slammed, through the years. I noticed an empty store. As I walked in, I noticed an empty store with a row of stools that looked like they were too high for me.
Mhm.
I had to step up to sit up on the stool. So as I walked in, a man with a loud voice, and he looked like he just had a huge chest. Now, I just remember this as a child, and his
Yeah.
uniform that he had on. He looked at me and he said, "What do you want? You don't belong in here." And I
Mm.
said to him, I replied that, "Oh, yes, I do. I want a hamburger." And I held up my money, and he stared at that money that I had in my hand. And my parents had told me, "Keep your money close to you."
Right.
So I wasn't letting go of it. But he stared at my money, and see, he wanted my money, but he didn't want my presence. And we know that happens often. And I'll say that again. He wanted my money, but he didn't want my presence. He didn't want me to be
Mm.
there. And, this man, like I said, he looked like just a huge monster to me. And so eventually he took my money. He said, "I'll fix you that hamburger, but you can't eat it in here." He prepared my hamburger, threw it on the counter, which slid down that counter. I remember that vividly. And I managed to catch it before it fell to the floor. And then he shouted for me to get out.
Mm.
He told me I didn't belong there.
Mm.
And as a child, I thought, mean monster. He was just a mean monster.
Yes.
What did I do to him? And I started thinking that's probably what Ruby Bridges thought. You know,
Yes.
what did I do to these people that are looking like this at me? So that picture of Ruby took me back to that time.
Mhm.
And, I thought to myself, when I was in that small town, I thought, I will not be treated like this again. If I am, I will figure a way to overcome this.
Yes.
I will be told that I can't access a place. I will not be told that. And I'm not sure what was going on in Ruby's head, but I'm sure it was something that was helping her to develop her crown. And that's developing your crown is just like a lessons learned. And so I
Yes.
scrolled through some of the comments on that post, and I noticed someone said something, made a comment about Ruby was building her crown or something of that nature. And guy just said, "That's it. That's the title for your short story, your stories, developing your crown," because everything that happens to us is a lesson learned that we should
Yes.
take information from and build upon it. And we have to be intentional about it, which is our topic today, meaning that we have to move with some type of purpose. So that's really where I got that title, developing your crown, because you develop your crown as you move along in childhood, and I think up into an adult. And I think it's up to us as parents, as a village, as a community, as a tribe, whatever you want to call it, to give our children direction. And these are things that they don't get in school. They don't learn how to be intentional in school.
Right.
And so these are characteristics, things that we need to provide to them, examples that we need to share with them. So that's where I came up with that title, Developing Your Crown.
Oh, that was good. Thank you for sharing that story with us. That is good. And I noticed you mentioned intentionality. Can you tell us what it mean? What is intentionality, and what does it mean to be intentional?
Well, intentionality means moving with purpose. It means being deliberate in whatever
Mm.
it is you do. Now, about 90% of the time, we just move from point A to point B on autopilot.
Yes,
So many times we don't have a plan for what it is that we're trying to do. And being intentional means moving with purpose and to make sure that your actions are counting. See, if you are on a train, you know that that track is going to lead you somewhere to your destination. That
yes.
track is part of your plan. And that's just like with being intentional. You have to have some type of plan of action to get to your goal. And so that, I mean, that is really what being intentional is. Intentionality. It's moving with action, having purpose. And at the end of this, so I hope everyone stays with us. At the end of this, I am going to share a few pearls with everyone to take away so they can know, so they can understand how they can be intentional.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
And if I could just say that a lot of the information that I am going over, I took from my reference from John C. Maxwell's book, The 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth. John started out with chapter 1 on intentionality. And so a lot of the information that you will hear me talk about comes from his book.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, you mentioned John Maxwell's book. So can you give us some examples of his concept on
Yes, he,
or go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. No, he has several concepts. He has 8 concepts. The chapter is full of just, I mean, it's a treasure of information on intentionality. And he has 8, but I'll only go over a few. As you can tell, I'm really excited to share.
Yes, yes, go ahead.
Okay, he has one. He calls them gaps. Gaps are traps, and one is the assumption gap, and that means that just because, for example, just because you have graduated from high school, don't just assume that success is going to automatically come your way. You have to take steps, have some type of plan um, to approach that, and that's the first gap. The second gap he mentions is the mistake gap. And this is one that we all suffer, and it's the fear of making mistakes. The whole saying that faith over fear, it is something that you need to write down and have it right in front of you.
Mm,
Faith over fear, because fear can make you stay in your tracks. Mistakes are
yeah,
just another way of growing, just like with Ruby, just like with myself. We didn't make any mistakes, but those were lessons that we had in our life. The things that happened to us that said, okay, just move on, be intentional, and learn from those things that happened. So when you have a mistake, you have to know that, have greater fear to overcome that. Just learn from your mistakes. That is the mistake gap. The next gap he mentions is the comparison gap. And that means,
uh-oh.
you have to be authentic. Don't compare yourself to others, and stop comparing yourself to folks on Facebook, Instagram, X, or whatever the social media is of your choice. But you have to be authentic. and move in your own voice, move in your own actions.
Yes.
So that is that's the third gap. And then he also has a gap, which is called, he being John Maxwell in his book, the knowledge gap. And basically, it's do the work. Know what it is that you're talking about. If you have a particular career that you're interested in, you need to find everything about that career that you are interested in.
Mm-hmm.
Knowledge is power, and we know that. We've heard that in several cases. Knowledge is power. So that's what the knowledge gap is. That is going to help you to be successful. Those are just a few. I mentioned that he has 8 different concepts, but I wanted to mention those 4 to kind of whet your appetite on the whole intentionality aspect.
And those are good. Those are I could see myself struggling with some of those. So those are some good ones right there. So yeah. Um, so also, I know you was talking about the gap trap. Which ones, are important to you as you go through this John Maxwell book? Did you find any that was really important to you?
All of them were really important to me. I think that one, the mistake gap, because that whole idea of fear can really hold you back. I
Yeah.
think that's one that sometimes I struggle with, the fear of making a mistake. But
Yeah.
once again, faith over fear will get you there. And I just have faith that I can move on. And so that's probably one of my, um, I would rank that as the number one, for myself.
Okay. Okay, that's good. Um, Also, what are some of the ways that we can practice intentionality?
Well, some of the ways that you can practice intentionality is to start out with a plan. If you have a project that you're working on, if you are saying that you are intentional about a particular project, say, for instance, if you, and it could be no matter how small or large the project is, say, for instance, you decide that you want to complete your taxes April 1st instead of waiting to the last minute like you may have done for years. We have all fallen a victim of that. Excuse
Yes,
me. Well, you plan ahead of time. Everyone knows when the taxes are due. So
right.
that means starting ahead of time, preparing for that. So I would say that, preparing, taking action, having a plan that will get you there, that's what's important. And then
Hmm.
moving on the action, writing it down, write down what that project is, write down what your plan of action is. And each day or each week, have some kind of timeline for yourself. So you'll
Yes.
see where you are with that plan. And then if you're not making success with meeting your timeline, then go back and see what were some of the gaps, what were some of the interruptions that stopped you. And then that tells you, okay, next time I need to overcome this interruption. I need to do something about this interruptions. And that's one of the concepts too. You have interruptions that will stop you from moving towards your dream. And so you have to know what some of those kind of forecasts, what some of those interruptions are going to be. So if you write down, okay, this is why I'm not at point B, is because of such and such. Some things happen and you have no control over it, but
Hmm.
sometimes you do. Sometimes you put yourself in a situation that you don't have to be in. Sometimes you're around people that you don't have to be around, and they will stop you from being intentional. And that actually is another gap that John Maxwell mentions. You know, you have to be around like-minded people, because
Yes.
sometimes if they're not on that same track with you, sometimes you fall off. So
Yeah.
it's fortunate that that happens, but you have to be, like-minded people. So, getting back to your question, you have to have a plan. You need to have a timeline, write it down, what you want to do, and look at, each day or each week, visit that plan and see where you are with that. Have a time, maybe in the evening, at night when it's quiet, you can go over your plan, take a look at it. I do a thing where a story is called The Power of the Notebook, and it talks about writing. It talks about journaling and how my grandmother did it back when. I didn't know that's what she was doing. I don't even know if that's what she called it, because they didn't talk about that. She would write things down in her notebook. She had a little small meat notebook, and she would write things down in her notebook. And I always wondered what that was. And one day, it's a long story, but one day I happened to peep in it, and she had everything. She had her grocery list in that little notebook. She had scriptures in that notebook. She had what she was going to do for Sunday, get ready for church, do this and that. I mean, it was gave her direction. And so that's what I say, the power of the notebook. Write things down. It's yours.
Yes.
It doesn't matter if it is not written correctly. It's yours. You write it according to how you feel and how you understand it. But it's your notebook, and it just kind of gives you direction.
Yes.
That answered your question.
Yes, it did. And that just makes me think of, because I like journaling, and
Mhm.
I've been journaling for years. And it just kind of gives you a place to put your thoughts down.
Mhm. Yeah.
And when you said intentionality, that is really what you're doing. You go back and look, and you be like, wow, I was thinking about this years ago.
Yeah. Huh.
And then, you took steps to actually make it happen. So
Right.
this is good. Thank you for that.
It helps you to
So,
manage your time. It helps you to manage
yes,
your emotions. I
yes,
mean, like I said, the power of the notebook, that's writing it down and seeing it written down. And sometimes I write things down all the time. And sometimes I can be at work and something pops up in my mind and I'll write it down.
you write
And
it
I
down.
keep books for work. I keep a notebook, and it fills up very quickly. But over the years, I think I've been keeping notebooks for work probably since about 1991, just
When we
writing
started.
down. And I have gone back, and I can see where I have made some progress in my life
Hmm.
at work. I can see where the things have cropped up again, and I need to prepare for it. Okay, now this happened to me. I should know better. It really it gives you some sense of direction.
Yes,
I agree with you on that, journaling.
yes. Thank you. And coming up with that, talking about journaling, you know, how does growth intentionality relate to forgiveness?
Well, we have to grow into forgiveness, right? You
Yes,
that and you have to be intentional about forgiving someone. You
yes,
have to take the steps to forgive someone. That's what being intentionality. Move with action. You can't just say, "Oh, I'll forgive her. I'll forgive him on that." Just move on and still carry that weight on your shoulders. When you forgive someone, as um, being the forgiveness coach, it just takes something off of your shoulders. It just relieves
yes,
you. But it's not something that you learn to do overnight. It is growing into it. And it's just like intentionality, growing into being intentional. And the whole forgiveness thing is you have to be intentional about forgiveness. But you
yes,
have to have a plan in some cases, to do it.
yes,
It's hard.
yes,
It's not an easy task. It's hard. And so it can be hard depending on the situation. But just have a plan of action to do that, to forgive. And so that's how the two work. You're growing in intentionality. You're growing in forgiveness. You are being intentional about whatever it is you're doing, because you're going to move with action. For forgiveness, you're going to move with action.
yes. Thank you for that. And just a little bit to add, to that is when you do forgive, forgiveness is growth.
Yes.
And when you know, do it intentionally, which starts with a decision, and you're going to do everything you can to find out about forgiveness, to move towards that, to live a forgiveness life.
Yes.
I like that. I like how you did the intentionality. Thank you. So just to switch a little bit, you know, as we kind of closing down, could you tell us a little bit about compassion at the well?
Yes. I came up with that title, you know, several years ago. I and this is a story that, I go back to this, but I was sitting at my dining room table, and everybody, most people have a place in their home that is like a good spot for them. My
Yeah.
dining room is a good spot for me. And I was sitting there, no TV on, and I often do that, no nothing, just sitting there, looking at my notes or writing things down or what have you. And I started feeling a little sorry for myself, because I started thinking, okay, I'm at this particular age. I'm not going to tell you what age it is, but I was thinking I'm at this particular age. And have I done really what I want to do? And do I really have time to do it?
All right.
And the Lord just spoke to me and said, yes, you do have time to do it. And I came up with this story storyline, which is Hello World.
Okay.
And so, and I started building off of that. And I came up with it was kind of like a narrative, and it starts out with Hello World. This is Geneane. I'm ready to kick problems to the curb and move on. And, it was
All
just
right.
really motivating. And I started out with that. And I thought I need to have some type of title for what this is about. And I
Mhm.
decided, well, at the time, a lot of people were doing blogs and all of that. And I was thinking of a title for a possible blog, and so I decided, I came up with Compassion at the Well. And I thought, Jesus met the lady at the well.
Yes.
And just like we have at work or any place, how, well, years ago there was a water fountain, and you would hear stories about being at the water fountain and exchange communication. And Jesus was compassionate, you know, at the well. And so the well, the water was like living water.
Yeah.
Every community needs water.
Yes.
Every life to keep moving, you need water. And Jesus was giving this lady information. So I thought, oh, compassion at the well. I'm at the well, and I need to share what I know. I need to share information. If I can be of help to someone, share information. I mean, I love and love and love to read. And so, I've got all this in my mind. Share. Someone needs a condensed version. Share. Compassion at the well. And so that's how I came up with that um, title, Compassion at the Well.
All right. Thank you. That is good. I like that. Um, and Jesus, you know, you think about a lot of times in our life, we need compassion.
Oh,
And
yes.
to think about how Jesus met the lady, he didn't meet her to judge her. He met
Right.
her to show compassion.
Yeah, he met her to show compassion.
I like that. That's good. Thank you. Thank you for that. And just a couple more questions before we wrap up. And just think about through all of your experience, you know, through life, you know, everything you've been through, you know, even with some discrimination and all of that, how have that developed or affect your writing?
Well, it has given me a lot of information to write about. And so, all the experiences that I have, a lot of the experiences that I have are my stories. I like to be on the positive note of things.
Right.
You will see a lot of people will write about the negativity that's going on. But I like, if I do start out with something negative, I like to have a positive slant to it. And I
Right.
also, a lot of my stories are lessons learned.
Yes.
I have one story that I write about this, the whole issue of worry, WORRY, worry. So because that a lot of us are worried all the time about what's going
Yes.
to happen. And some of us don't know. Really, some people just don't know how to be positive. They are in that pit and they don't know how to get themselves out of that pit.
Right.
So it all this has affected my writing because when I write my short stories, I want to have that positive slant to it. And yes, people give testimonies, but sometimes they'll give a testimony and they'll stop it. What was the lesson learned out of that testimony? The testimony doesn't have to be always negative, it can be positive.
Right.
Like the power of the notebook.
Yes.
That's a positive thing. I
Yes.
have, it's called the dip, where just as a child, I would just, you know, it's really like meditating today, but I would just, dream. And that's a positive slant. Everything does not have to be on the negative side. Every lesson learned does not have to come out of being negative, but you can have a positive experience that will give you some um, positive writing. And so that my writing is basically is really, it has positive notes to it. And it's, they're little short stories. And then I also try to move in my stories with positive notes and inspirational messages and things that I've learned, like through John Maxwell. I try to incorporate all that within my stories as well.
Okay, good. Thank you. Yes, I had an opportunity to hear some of your work, and they are inspirational and inspiring, all at the same time, you're also giving God glory, uh,
Yes.
and you giving people hope.
Hope. Oh,
I
yeah.
like that. Yes, you are giving people hope. I'm like, oh, I like how she, puts the stories together because, everybody has a story. My theme is we all have a story.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Our journey just may be different, but we all have a story.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that. So
And
thank you.
what I mean, cut you off, but one of the greatest stories that you can tell or you can write is the story of yourself. If
Yes,
you have that, because those are experiences that you have that you can share with people, it also lets people know that, you know, you're not alone in the things that you've gone through. Just
yes,
like with me, that happened years and years ago at that store. And then here Ruby Bridges is. And, she had an experience. Her experience was much greater than mine because hers lasted over a period of time. Mine was like that day. And then,
yes.
I'm a little away. But, it's just that it's so much that you can get out of life, but you have got to write it down, share it, and, move on. You
And
got
move
to have
on.
to learn from all those things lessons that you have.
Yes. And that's the key, learning from your lessons,
Mm-hmm.
learning from your journeys, I always say life is like a roller coaster.
Yeah.
You're gonna have some ups, you're gonna have some downs, you're gonna go through some dark places, you're gonna have storms of life. Um, so I like that, but we just have to write our own stories.
But yet we have to write our own stories. And I like how you mentioned hope, because, some people have no hope.
Right,
They grew up with no hope.
exactly.
When you have no hope and no faith, if you just stay in that hole, some people don't know how to dig themselves out. And we cannot assume that everybody knows what we know, or we know what everybody else knows. You
You
can't
just
assume
spoke
that.
that word.
Yeah, because people, I have a thing where I will tell people we didn't grow up in the same household. Don't
Right,
assume that my life went like your life.
Yes.
or vice versa. But it came to me years and years ago. Some people just don't have any hope. But I'm going to tell you something real quick, which is another story. It
That's
just came
okay. Go ahead.
when I was at Tennessee State. My grandmother, who, when I wrote that part of the notebook, that was about her too. But she was instrumental in my life. And when I was at Tennessee State, she would write me letters. And she didn't say a whole lot, but what she said had a punch to it. It was powerful.
Yes.
Um, she wrote me a letter that I have to this day. And she said, I don't, and she would write it on a little piece of paper. It could be um, a piece of paper she tore off something. It could be a sack, or it could be a little piece of paper, and she would write a note on it to me. And she said, I don't have much news to tell you, but the one thing I do have to tell you is that Jesus saves. She wrote me that note. She said, Jesus saves.
Yes.
I kept that note. Now, it means more to me now because I understand it more
Mm-hmm.
than I did then. But she
Yeah.
was sending me a message of hope. She knew that I was away from home. She knew that anything that happens to you, you realize, Geneane, Jesus saves. And she said,
Yeah.
I just remember her saying, I don't have much to tell you, but Jesus. And I have that. She gave me hope. She said, she
Yes.
was saying to me, you have your faith. Lean back on that faith. Use that faith. Jesus gives us that. It's a free gift. Prayer
Yeah.
is a free gift.
Yeah.
Everything he gives us is free. So, you know, she instilled that in me years and years ago. Like I said, it didn't hit me until later on that I had to pull that out of my bag, and use it. But I realized that some people do not have that hope. They do not have that faith. They were not raised with that. That's why it's
Right.
up to us as a village, as a tribe, as a community to share with our young ones. Because, the world is getting out of hand. And
Yes.
it's
It is.
right with our young, giving them that information, letting them know there is hope. There is hope. But you have to be intentional about it.
Has to be intentional. Thank you. Thank you. And before we wrap up, is there anything else you would like to tell the people before we close out?
Yeah, I want to give them these three pearls that I mentioned. I
Yeah.
said that I have some pearls, and these pearls are actually from another one of John Maxwell's books, and it's called Intentional Living. And the first pearl is that you have to be intentional. I mean, you have to be deliberate. In what you do, you have to be deliberate. He says that life is not a dress rehearsal. You don't have any do overs. I mean, you need to do it now. Be deliberate in what you do.
Mm-hmm.
Deciding, just remember, deciding isn't doing. You need to act on it. Be deliberate to accomplish anything. And being deliberate, you have to have that action. You have to have that plan. You're being intentional. The second nugget is to be consistent. Be consistent. Now, I will tell you, this is one thing that I struggle with. I can be a person that is not very consistent. And sometimes not being consistent comes with being bored because you're just tired of it. Okay, I'll drift on to something else. But you need to be consistent in what you do. So if you're being consistent with positive things, they compound over time and your life will be positive. But if
Yeah.
you do negative things, if you're consistent with negative things, you're going to continue to be negative. Life is going to be negative. So be positive. People say, why are you always having, that's not how life is. You always have a positive slant on things. You got to. I have to make it.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
around me can be very dark at times.
Yes.
And I have to be in control. And I know that I do have to be consistent, but it needs to be on a positive note.
Right.
You can stay in your dark little world if you want to. That's fine, but not for me. I like I said, there's no do-overs in life, in this
Right.
earthly life. We're
Yes,
here on earth for a certain period of time, then we leave. So
exactly.
I don't want any regrets. The third one is to be willful. I know in my community, in my household, we had a saying: say what you mean and mean what you say. Say what you mean and mean what you say, or you can even reverse that.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to be willful, meaning you have to move on it. Most people don't lead their lives, they just accept their life the way it is. And you need to just not accept things the way they are.
Right.
Be willful and try to make a change if you can.
Yes.
I shouldn't say if you can, but you can make a change.
Yeah.
But remember that hope and think to yourself, how much do you want to make a difference with your life? And you can make a difference if you are willing to fight for it, if you are willing to be intentional. So that was 3 points, 3 pearls: be deliberate, be consistent, and be willful. 3 things that you can take with you. Have a plan. Think about, am I being intentional?
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome
you, Geneane, for joining us today. And I would love to have you back other time so you can share some more nuggets with us.
anytime. I'd love to do that.
Yeah. So I just thank you. I thank you for joining us for this episode of Empower Connect. Remember, even when life throws you off course, you are never defeated. Though knocked down, you are not out. So rise up, dust yourself off, and with intentionality, turn the page to the next chapter of your journey. Keep nourishing your growth, embracing your challenge as an opportunity, and wearing your crown with resilience. Until next time, keep striving, keep growing, keep developing your crown. This is Carolyn McLean, your host of Empower Connect. I would like to thank our guest, Geneane White, today. God bless you as we sign off. Thank you.